my name is Emma.
Hi, my name is Xavier, and we would like to welcome you to Curious Conversations, a podcast for kids, by kids.
It's a podcast where we have conversations with adults and kids from all walks of life to learn about their passions and what inspires them, which we know will inspire us and hopefully inspire you too.
Why us, you might ask? Well, we love to ask questions. We are twins, and we just turned 11, and we have over a decade of experience being kids and having a point of view on many topics.
We thought a podcast would be a great way to learn something new and explore our interests in a different way, so we thought, why don't we give it a try? On today's episode, we have our very first international interview and our very first mother-daughter duo. We can't wait to talk to Emelie Cheng Pollard and her daughter Ania. Emelie is a Canadian living in Sweden and is a graphic designer and avid traveler.
There are so many different things about this interview I'm looking forward to. I'm so excited to talk to Emelie and Ania about what it's like to live in Sweden.
And we are doing our first mother-daughter duo. We thought it would be fun to hear about things like international travel and living in a different country from an adult and a kid.
And there is one more thing. We haven't met Emelie or Ania yet, but Emelie went to high school with her mom, and this is one of her oldest friends.
I am hoping Emelie can tell us some fun stories about Mom and her high school friends. Xavier, why don't you tell us a bit more about Emelie and Ania?
Emelie is born and raised Chinese-Canadian, and she has been living in Stockholm, Sweden since 2006. Her husband, Stefan, is a Swedish-American and also a twin. They are parents to their 10-year-old daughter, Ania. Emelie's first university degree was in economics. Right after she graduated, she realized that she really wanted to work in a creative field, so she decided to study graphic design. Her first design jobs were in New York City, where she lived for 5 years before moving to Sweden. Right now, Emelie is working as an art director at the fashion brand H&M, where she creates marketing campaigns specifically for the kids department. Emelie's interested in all things designing, but also enjoys cooking, photographing, traveling, writing, and being out in nature. But her biggest passion is definitely traveling.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi.
So fun to be here with you guys.
Good to meet you. Well, I'm obviously Emma. He's Xavier. We're going to start just asking you for a couple questions. I'm going to start what me and my brother are really curious about. So you went to high school with our mom, at Havergal College in the boarding system. So do you have any stories from when your friends were in Havergal?
Oh my goodness, that is a good question and one that I'm actually not 100% prepared for. I mean, we have a lot of stories. As you know, we boarded together for, I think it was 3 years. And I mean, we spent so much time together.
I also heard that you guys used to steal ice cream bars from the kitchen.
We did do that. We used to sneak into the cafeteria at night, and I don't know even how we managed to find our way into the cafeteria, but we did get in there, and we used to steal ice cream bars, and I think we got away with it for, I don't know, I don't even think we ever got caught, so that was pretty amazing.
That's impressive. Emelie, we want to learn more about what you do, but first, Ania, can you explain what you think your mom does?
My mom is a graphic designer, so she works at H&M and designs, or she doesn't design that, but she works with kids' clothes, and she helps decide on pictures how they should look like and what they should wear, and how they should stand and how the background should look like.
Okay, now let's hear what your mom has to say. Emelie, we read on your website today that you were an art director for H&M, but your website also said you were a freelance creative director and graphic designer. How would you explain that to kids like us?
Yes, it is a really good question. And to be honest, it's something that I often have to explain not only to kids, but to adults, because it's not at all a really I think it can be really unclear what is graphic design, and I think art direction is even less clear what that means. So they are actually two slightly different jobs, and I have worked as both. So I can maybe start by explaining what a graphic designer does, because that is actually what I've first been trained to do and what I spent many years working with. And so I would say graphic design might be best explained as visual problem solving. So that can take on any number of forms. So a graphic designer can, for example, design book covers or magazine layouts, or they can be doing, nowadays it's a lot about websites and that type of thing. But also it can be for brand identities, for example. So doing logos for companies or packaging design. So it's really, really wide ranging. It is really about putting, I would say, images and words together in a way that communicates clearly, whatever that might be. So if it's a story, if it's, for example, a food package, everything from, your cereal boxes to your shampoo bottles, like those are all works of graphic design that people really think hard about to decide about colors and, text and, what words go on there. So I would say graphic design in essence is very much about how words and images come together to communicate different things in the world around us.
So I love to do art, and I was wondering if you did art in school too.
Yes, definitely. I've always loved art, and when I was a kid, I used to always love to draw, so I would do that for fun. And then I took art, of course, like all the way, through high school as well. So yeah, definitely, I think that's often the starting place for a lot of designers. And usually it's maybe a first clue about whether that could be a future career for you.
Let's talk about how a Canadian ends up living in Sweden, and what was it like to move to a new country?
That has been really a huge part of my life has been, the decision to come and live in Sweden. And I did that back in 2006. So now I've actually lived in I've lived in Sweden for the most of my adult life. And so it's, in some ways, it's kind of, Sweden is as much my home as Canada is as well. Basically, I moved to Sweden back in 2006. And I would say for a Canadian living in Sweden, there are quite a lot of similarities. And I think that in some ways that has made the transition a lot smoother than if I had come from, a totally different country, like, for example, India or, somewhere with a completely different climate and culture.
Yeah.
But I think that Canada and Sweden share a lot of things in common. Like, for example, we're both countries up in, the north.
You get pretty much all the seasons, not like...
We get all the seasons. We get kind of quite cold and long winters. And,
I can relate to that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think even because of the similar sort of geography, we have a lot of similar landscapes. So I think a lot of times when you're out in nature here, there are a lot of places that look like I could be anywhere in Canada. So, we have lots of forests, we have lots of lakes, and I think that if you were to go out into the woods here, you could just as easily be in an Ontario forest or in BC somewhere. And And I think in some ways it kind of makes you, like, it made me feel really comfortable, like right from the start, because I already knew how to dress for the seasons, and, you know, a lot of things really looked similar.
When we went to Sweden, it was like 3 years ago, I think. We were like driving down a road, and it just looked like the same thing as if you were going to like an airport. Like you have to pass through some city, kind of like this kind of cool landscape. The thing I found most interesting, so we recently went to like a friend's cottage this summer, and there were like kind of like rocks built into the grass and road, and that kind of reminded me of a certain road when we went down street, and I was like, oh, that's so weird.
Yeah, it's so cool that you guys came here, actually. What did you think of it?
I found it very similar, like as you said. I did enjoy that I forget the museum name. What was it called? Anyways, there was like a ship built. It was built around the ship, and I found that really interesting.
Yeah, that one's called Vasa Museet, which is the big ship that sunk, and they dug it up, and now it's a museum. It's super cool.
That's a kind of a very cool way to build a museum.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So, Ania, we know you have spent a little bit of time in Canada as well. Do you know what you think the similarities or differences between living in Canada and living in Sweden?
Well, I think the language is a big part of the difference, since here we speak Swedish and there you speak English.
Yes.
But it's also different since I think you learn French in school, right? And we learn English.
Yeah, we do.
Yes, we do.
And we learn English in school like you learn naturally.
Wow. See, I'm not very good at French, so I think you do much more better in English class than I do in French, because that's like one of my least favorite subjects.
Well, that's the thing, which is pretty amazing about Sweden, and which also made it really easy to move here. As a Canadian, is that everyone speaks such good English here. And maybe you noticed that when you visited Sweden, but basically everyone speaks English. So you can go into any store, you can almost count on the fact that the person is going to totally understand you and be able to speak almost perfectly back with you without having any trouble. And so it's that's you get really lucky being an English speaker. So life is a lot smoother just because everyone is so good at English.
Do you both speak fluent Swedish?
Is that a question for me or for Ania?
Yeah, both of you.
Well, I'll speak for myself. I would say that I have a working knowledge of Swedish. So I'm at the point now where I can speak and understand in most situations, but I'm definitely not 100% fluent. Like, I make mistakes all the time, and it's definitely not perfect, and Ania corrects me all the time as well. So, you know, I think it's really the difference between like learning a language, you know, from when you're a kid to having to sort of learn a language when you're in your 30s, which is, you know, when I moved here. But I tend to continue to speak English, for example, at work, and we speak English at home most of the time. But Ania,
I often speak Swedish since I go to school in that language. But I also speak a lot of English since I have a lot of relatives from America and Canada. So I can understand both languages pretty fluently. But there's some, if I've, for example, gone to school for an entire day in Swedish, maybe I forget lots of words in English for a while, just because I've gone in Swedish. And it can also be vice versa. If I've spoken a lot of English, then I can forget some Swedish for a while.
It's still impressive.
So we know you went to school in Canada for a bit, a couple of years ago. Can you tell us what the similarities and differences between school in Canada and school in Swedish?
I'd say since you guys start school when you were 5, and here in Sweden we start when we're 6. So when I went to school in Canada, I went in grade 2 because that's the grade I would have gone if I was in Sweden. So I should have been in grade 3 instead of grade 2 because they were more of the level I was, since they were more of the same age as I was.
Yeah, so basically Anya you were in grade 2 with a lot of kids who were 1 year younger than you, actually. So that was a big difference. Yeah.
So we have questions for you, Anya. We already asked you what's your first language. So what is your favorite candy or sweets that you like to eat?
I don't like a lot of candy, but I really like chocolate.
Me too.
You don't like a lot of candy? You kidding me?
I'm the same as with you, Anya. He likes a lot of candy. I enjoy chocolate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're not the only one, Anya. It does seem pretty unusual, though. I think most people are in Xavier's camp there.
So Emelie, we know that you love to travel. How did your love for travel start?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that it started mostly because I started traveling really pretty young, and that had a lot to do with my dad's job. So he was an engineer, and he often lived all over the world in different countries for work the whole time when I was growing up. So when I was around 7, he actually went to live in Pakistan for a few years. And then shortly after that, he was living in India. And so, and that's also part of the reason why I went to boarding school with your mom, was because my parents were living overseas. Not since I was 7, mind you, but that was obviously when I was a little bit older. But the fact was that since my dad was living far away in all of these foreign countries, we would often go on vacations to visit him. And then since they were quite far away, we would usually take bigger trips and travel around in whatever areas he was living in. So we traveled to a lot of really far away and interesting places since I was pretty young. So we were traveling all over Asia, and so for example, Pakistan and India were some of the first countries that I visited, which was pretty unusual for a 7-year-old at the time.
Yeah.
So I think through those trips, I got a lot of exposure to lots of different cultures and foods, and I really found it fascinating then, and that sort of stayed with me through my whole life. So I feel like, I just got used to it, and I got really curious about other countries since I was a kid. And so it's something that I continue to do as a teenager, and basically all through my adult life as well. And it's something that we try to do a lot as a family now, as much as possible, because I think it's just one of the most exciting and interesting things that I think there is to do in life, generally.
So do you know when the first time you traveled alone?
Well, I think actually the first time I traveled totally alone would be when I was 16, and I spent a summer in France. Basically, you had the opportunity to go to France and learn about environmental conservation. I spent a month living in the French Alps together with young people, and it was amazing. We basically lived in a house together up in the French Alps, and we spent our days sort of learning about forestry and protecting the environment, and then we also did a lot of fun stuff like going on hikes and visiting cheese factories and stuff like that. And also it was a chance for me to actually practice French as well. So that was super fun. And so that was the first time that I traveled totally on my own, and I stayed for a month on my own in this little French village.
So, this is for both of you. What has been your favorite trip so far?
Do you have one? Do you want to start?
I thought it was really fun going to Canada for half a year.
Yeah, that was great.
So, do you know what part of the Canadian trip was your favorite?
I liked going to this thing called Louisiana, which was like, the big thing where they did lots of acrobatics. We went with, our cousins.
Oh, Cirque du Soleil.
Yeah,
Cirque du Soleil, yeah.
Yes.
It's kind of like where they do the trapeze and all the flips, and it's impressive, and I don't know how they do it.
That was super fun. And I guess for me, a favorite trip, I would say one of the best trips that we've ever taken was to the Faroe Islands, which we did a couple of years ago. Do you guys know where that is?
No, we
I
do
don't.
not. I've never even heard of that place.
Yeah, a lot of people haven't, because one of the reasons is that it's a super tiny place and almost nobody lives there. But there are these tiny islands, which are technically, I believe, they're part of Denmark, but they're also like independent. So they're independent, but also kind of connected to Denmark. But they are basically in the North Atlantic. And they are these tiny islands. And I think one of the interesting statistics is that they have more sheep than people living there. And they're just really remote, but really beautiful. Like they have super dramatic landscapes, like crazy waterfalls and just amazing mountainous surroundings. I think one of the really interesting things we did was we saw a whole colony of puffins, puffins are really interesting birds, which are kind of like, I would say the closest I can think of would be like kind of like a penguin, but they can fly and they're extremely cute and they're really like unafraid of humans. So you can really kind of like go up to them and sit next to them. And there's like, if you look it up on the internet, you can see what they look like later. So anyway, it's just this really fascinating country, which is super like vast and remote. And basically, there's very few people there. So it's extremely quiet, but the nature is very beautiful and very dramatic. So that really stands out as a really fascinating place.
That sounds so like fun. I totally want to see a puffin.
Yeah, Google it later.
I will, yeah.
So, Emelie, do you know what was your worst travel experience?
Oh, yeah, I've had some messy travel experiences for sure. One travel experience which was really a little bit scary, actually. It was actually a diving trip, which I took in the Philippines. And I went on a sort of a diving trip with this company, which was a little bit, I think they weren't that professional. And basically, I was doing a dive with a group. For part of the dive, a few of us were actually kind of got a little bit lost underwater because the people who were supposed to keep track of us, they had kind of weren't really paying attention. And so it wasn't very long. It was maybe like, it was probably just a few minutes, but it was really scary to kind of feel that you were in the ocean and that you didn't really know where you were. But it was a really scary few minutes. And so that was maybe one of the worst travel experiences I've had.
What are some of your favorite museums? That could be for both of you.
If you have favorite museums, I have some favorites. Do you have a favorite you want to talk about?
Yeah, my favorite museum is probably one like in English terms it would probably be like the Technical Museum, which is they have lots of like electronics and cool things with like phones and
robots and stuff.
Oh yeah, like kind of like they put them on display and stuff like that. I think we took a virtual tour of that during online learning. I forget what it was called. It was very interesting.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah.
My favorite museums is, I have many actually, but I think my favorite art museum is in Denmark, near Copenhagen, a museum called Louisiana, which is just this really beautiful museum. It's by the sea, and they often have really, really lovely exhibitions. But it's a kind of museum that it's almost as much about like the actual building and the actual environment is almost as nice as whatever's going on inside. So it's just a really nice place to go as a trip. So it's just really pretty, and I just love like where it's situated. And so that's one of my favorites.
One of my favorite art museums, we got it in New York. What was it? The Jackson Pollock Museum. The Met. I'm pretty sure it was the Met, but 2019 Christmas, we visited my cousins in New York, and we got to see these museums. I love abstract art. It's very, very interesting. So, like, there was these ones that looked like they just threw with a bucket, not even splatter paint. They just, like, threw paint with a bucket. It was super cool. And I especially like the Jackson Pollock Museum.
Yeah, the Met is great. And Jackson Pollock is also really, really a fun artist.
Okay, so what is the next thing on your wish list for travel vacation?
That's a hard one. There's always so many. Do you want to go first?
Well, I want to go to Canada again because I thought that was really fun. But I've always wanted to go to Paris.
That's a good one.
So do you know where in Canada you want to go next?
Probably Vancouver. I like going there.
Is there anywhere that you haven't been? Oh, you said Paris, actually. Yes. Yeah, that would be your
cool.
bucket list. Yeah. For me, I think that I would really love to go to Africa because that's one continent that I haven't been to at all. So I would say that would be pretty high up on my list.
I think I'd like to go to Egypt, the Nile River. It'd be really cool.
Yes, definitely.
That'd be really cool. Like, it's completely different from our living environment, so.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe somewhere in South America as well.
Both Africa and South America, there are so many interesting countries within them that, almost any of them would be super cool.
So who inspires you and why?
Is that for me or is that for Ania or?
Both of you.
You want to go first?
I don't know if you've heard of this person, but there's this girl called Greta Thunberg.
Oh, I know her.
That strikes for the climate, which I think is she's really cool. So I think she's a very cool girl.
Yeah, she sailed 2 weeks to go to North America just to start one thing.
She's quite amazing. She also has a documentary. We haven't seen it yet, but I do want to. I think it's just called Greta.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's definitely a really great role model, I think, for both kids and adults. So she is definitely inspiring. I think for me, I was thinking about this because it was in your list of sort of prep questions, and I was trying to think of who might be interesting to talk about. And I thought of one person who maybe would be interesting for the two of you because you guys are doing this podcast now, which is all about interviewing people. And so the person I'm thinking of is a guy called Brandon Stanton, and he runs it's both a blog and an Instagram page called Humans of New York. Have you heard of that or have you seen that?
No, I haven't before.
No. It's one of my favorite things like on the internet or social media right now. And basically what he does is he basically takes a portrait of them and just interviews them about kind of their life. And he must have like a really amazing interview technique because he manages to get people to say just the most interesting things about themselves. The stories that these people tell, they can be funny, they can be incredibly sad, they can be really dramatic, they can just be super crazy. And it's just amazing, like the variety of different stories and lives that people have. And I think what I find inspiring about this particular Instagram page is the fact that I think through the power of storytelling and really, really strong interviewing, he's created this really international community of people who follow his work and who are just genuinely just really interested in the human stories of just ordinary people around the world. And what's sort of happened through this building of community is that he's really sort of created this space where people will help each other. If there's someone who, tells a story and maybe they're in a sad place in their life, or maybe sometimes it's a homeless person, or it's maybe someone who's been struggling a lot through the pandemic. There's all these people who will say, okay, how can we help this person? And so this guy, Brandon, has often, organized fundraisers and GoFundMe pages where all of a sudden, like, millions of people from around the world will just donate to sort of help this person that they've never met, just this totally random person that has an amazing story or maybe just really needs help. And I think it's just this kind of beautiful thing that happens where just using social media to tell human stories has created a community where people are really helping each other.
I think that's really a good idea. I have another question for both of you because I've always wondered about this with other countries. So for us, like maybe like a little road trip, we'd go to Toronto and we'd go like see a hockey game or something like that. But what are some of your favorite places you like to go in Sweden?
One of my favorite places to go in Sweden is, what would you say, Greta?
An amusement park.
There's an amusement park that I like going to that has lots of fun rides and games you can play on, and I think that's really fun going there.
One of ours that we go to is called Canada's Wonderland. I'm pretty sure it's the same thing, but there are all these rides, and I think my favorite thing about it is getting beaver tails. I love beaver tails. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're kind of like a doughy thing, kind of like in a cylinder, kind of squarey shape, and it's like really warm, and you can put like any icing on it. So that's just one of my favorite parts of Canada's Wonderland.
So have you guys ever been to Tivoli Gardens?
Oh, that's really good. I like that place.
Yes, we have actually been talking about going there. I've only been there once, but it was actually, you know what? No, I'm wrong. You have been there, but you were only 1 year old, so you don't remember. So Ania has been there, but she was a tiny baby. So, but we have been talking about going there again. So hopefully we'll go.
It is fun. We went there when we were obviously traveling like Sweden and Denmark. I have so many rides, but they're really cool. There's one where it spins you around and your legs are hanging and you don't it's kind of, you feel like you're going to fall off at any moment, but it's really good.
Nice.
Oh yeah, what is your favorite place in Sweden?
My favorite place in Sweden. Oh, that's that is a really that's a hard one. Let me think for a second. I think that one of my favorite places is actually an island called Gotland, which is a pretty big island in the Baltic Sea. And we've actually been there a few times, and I really love it because they just have amazing beaches and the landscape is like super beautiful, and it's just a really, really special place. But it's just such a lovely place to go if, to go swimming or just to go just to go exploring. And so that's one of my favorite places to visit, definitely in Sweden.
That sounds so beautiful. So, before we end, do you have any questions you want to ask us?
Yes, I have some questions. Do you have any questions?
How is it to be twins?
See, it's kind of balanced. Like, it's kind of like having someone there if you always need them, but also having someone there to always annoy you.
It's good. There's goods and bads, as with everything.
Pros and cons.
Pros and cons. Yeah.
It's an amazing thing to be a twin. It's a very rare thing to have. It's probably a thing that that someone's always by your side no matter what, because they're always the closest person to you. It's very sweet that we share a very bigger bond than usually a brother and sister would do. So it's just amazing to be a twin. It's just awesome.
I have a question which is kind of connected to that, and that is, just seeing you do this amazing thing, which is this podcast together. Do you imagine that when you are adults, that you might end up working together or doing, something together in your kind of eventual careers?
Maybe. You never know. We could get the same passion, and we don't know. And maybe we could go to the exact same place. You never know. It's possible.
I don't know. Like, it seems like we're opposites, but we really aren't, which kind of makes it weird. But yeah, I think that's a possibility.
Well, we'll keep our eyes open to see what you two come up with in the future.
Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. It's been really fun.
Bye.
Bye.
Wow, that was a great interview.
I really loved listening to how she's been to so many different places around the world. I thought they were super interesting, and I've changed my mindset on going to those places.
I love talking to our first mother-daughter duo and our first international interview. My favorite part was probably that we got to hear about Anya's different, the differences between going to school in Sweden and going to school in Canada. And I also find that it's super cool that you can speak fluently in both languages. As for Emelie, I liked her job. It seems so cool, kind of like a graphic designer for H&M, which is a really nice clothing store. So it was overall really great. Thank you for listening, and I know all the shows you listen to probably say this, but please rate the podcast and download the episode. And follow us on Twitter and Instagram, that'll be in the show notes. And if you want to say hi to us, we'd love to connect with you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Curious Conversations.
Bye!